Hello, friends. Welcome to Learn with Lakshman Dharmaraj. Today we'll talk about research process. If you are new to this channel, do not forget to subscribe.
Steps in the process of research we had seen yesterday are formulating the research problem, extensive literature survey, developing the hypothesis, preparing research designing, determining the sample design, collecting the data, execution of the project, analysis of the data, hypothesis testing, generalizations and interpretations, and preparation of the report or of the results. Okay. So these were the steps. We have generally talked about these steps, and we're going to discuss these steps in detail. The first step that we are going to discuss here is formulating the research problem. How the research problem is formulated. The first thing that a researcher has to do is single out the problem. Single out means you just have to find out the problem. To understand, researcher must decide the general area of interest or aspect of the subject matter, that is singling out the problem. You have to single out the problem. Say you have to decide what area I am going to select for my research, or what is the area of my interest. Once you select the area of your interest, the problem is singled out because all other possibilities are ruled out. Say, for instance, I have decided to carry out my research in language teaching. Now, once I have decided that I have to carry out my research in English language teaching, all other areas, the possibility of all other areas has been ruled out. So I'll not think about all other things. Now I'll just think about the single area called English language teaching. Now, after having this, it is the responsibility of the researcher to state the problem broadly or in general way. Initially, a researcher has to state the problem broadly or in general way. No one can state the problem specifically in the beginning. Steps that you can take, or two things that you can do while formulating the research problem. One, understanding the problem thoroughly. The first thing that you can do is you have to understand the problem thoroughly and rephrasing the same into meaningful terms. Research is about thinking, and it is also about presenting. So when you think and understand the problem, you understand it thoroughly, and once you have understood the problem thoroughly, your job is to rephrase the problem, or your job is to put the problem into words. And what kind of words? You should use the words or the terms which are actually meaningful. So you have to rephrase the problem into meaningful terms. And how can this be done? How can you understand the problem and then put it in the meaningful terms? The best way of understanding the problem is you can discuss it with your friends, you can discuss it with your colleagues, you can discuss this problem with the expert, and lastly, you can discuss your problem with your research guide or any other experienced person who can help you in understanding the problem. I mean, there is a problem in your mind. When you discuss this problem with any expert, guide, colleague, or everybody, they may provide certain insights into it for you. So this was about formulating the research problem. Once the general area of interest or aspect of the subject matter is decided, you just have to single out the problem. But it has not been done yet. See, what I have given you an example that I have selected the general topic, that is English language teaching. Now, when English language teaching was selected, I have ruled out the possibility of linguistics, possibility of literary genres, possibility of all other things, say for example, pragmatics, semantics, and morphology. These possibilities were ruled out. There was only possibility of ELT, but ELT is comparatively a broad area. So you cannot take ELT in general. Therefore, again, you have to be specific in case of ELT, whether you want to go for the theories, whether you want to go for the practices, methods, approaches, strategies, or whether you want to work with certain alternate approaches, communicative approaches, humanistic approaches, plenty of with which you can work or you can carry out your research in. So again, you have to be specific in that while formulating the research problem. See, after you have formulated your research problem in general terms, the common practice in our area is a researcher wants to carry out research, and then he approaches a guide or a supervisor, and then the guide tells the problem in general terms to the student that you can carry out research in this area. For example, if I go to my guide will tell me what is the area of your interest. I may say that English language teaching is the area of my interest. So my guide will tell me, okay, then you can carry out research in language learning strategies. Now, this is what my guide has done to me. That he has told me to carry out research in language learning strategies. Though I mean, there are other guide may also tell me to carry out research in language teaching strategies. Guide may also tell me to carry out research in other fields like practices, common practices, or techniques, or skills and everything, right? Soft skills and everything. It is possible, but let us consider that my guide tells me to carry out research in strategies. What strategies? There are two types of strategies. One is language learning strategy, and the other is language teaching strategy. So my guide tells me to carry out research in language learning strategies because my guide knows that very less work has been done on the language learning strategy. So the problem is generally, in general terms, is given to me by my guide, and it is the duty of the researcher to narrow it down now and phrase it in the operational terms. Now, what are the students or the researchers supposed to do? Language learning strategies area. Okay, so a researcher is supposed to narrow it down and phrase it in the operational terms. Operational terms are the terms that you are going to use throughout your research. Okay, now use of language learning strategies is there in America, it is there in China, it is there in Japan, it is there in India, it is there in every part of the world. Then this becomes a very big area. Then I have to narrow it down again to, I have to limit it to the area. Okay, then language learning strategies, use of language learning strategies. India. Okay, India is comparatively a big nation, so you cannot have the data collected from all the people of India. So you have to limit yourself to a particular state, then to a district, and then to a taluka, right? Or you can think about a university. So this is possible. These are the possibilities. Okay. Now this is done in case of educational institutions. In educational institutions, your guide tells you the problem in general terms, and the researcher narrows it down and phrases it in the operational terms. Now, in case of business units or in governmental organizations, see, we all belong to the educational institutions and universities, so we have this first option. In private business units or government organizations, the problem is put forth by administrative agencies. Agencies tell the researcher that you have to do research on this, or this is a possible area in which you can carry out your research, because they know it and they want researcher to carry out research in that particular area. Now, the researcher can inquire about as to how problem originated and everything to those administrative authorities in those business units or governmental organizations. But it is important for a researcher to examine all available literature. Why? Because once the researcher examines all available literature, she becomes familiar with the selected problem, because that is the most important thing. One should be familiar with the selected problem, or one should get acquainted with the selected problem. Now, how Do you find this literature? We have seen that there are two types of literatures, right? What are the two types of literatures? One is the conceptual literature, and the second is the empirical literature. Data available. What is the data or literature available with you? That is conceptual and empirical. Both types of literature, that is conceptual in the sense concerning the concepts and the theories. Literature concerning the concepts and the theories in relation to a particular topic, and empirical, which consists earlier studies on the same or similar topic. That is called empirical, and everything in this should be reviewed by the researcher so that he gets fully acquainted with the problem at hand. Then the problem must be put in most possible specific terms. After doing all these things, try to understand, single out the problem or let your guide tell you the area, then narrow down it, phrase it in operational terms. Okay, then examine the available literature, both types of literature. I mean, even if you are the student of literature, you're supposed to have the review of whole literature, of theories as well as of the empirical data, or as well as the research carried out by other people on the same topic or similar topic. This also needs to be reviewed by the researcher. Now, once this is done, the problem must be put in most possible specific terms. That would be the title of your research topic when you put it in most specific terms. Say, for instance, we've been talking about language learning strategies. As I told you, my guide told me to work on language learning strategies. So what I was trying to understand is, first of all, I need to understand what is language learning strategy. So I'll have some 10, 15, 20 definitions of language learning strategies with me, right? Someone will say it is a tool used by the advanced learners for the self-directed learning. Okay, that is, or it is a series of maneuvers that a student does to enhance his learning. Right. So these are the possible definitions. Now, I also should know how many language learning strategies are there. Now, people have spoken about language learning strategies, so there are plenty of language learning strategies. I have the list of language learning strategies with me. Now, I have to, just to understand whether these language learning strategies are used in this particular area or not, or used in India or not. So I limit myself to the area. And then what do? I try to analyze it. Okay, so I have to analyze it. So I'll frame title like analysis of the language learning, analysis of the use of language learning strategies. I have phrased it, analysis of the use of language learning strategies. Now I have to make it area specific. If I'm supposed to make it area specific, then what I do, I'll limit it to a specific area. Okay. Now, if I have limited it to the specific area, let's consider that I have limited it to the specific area of Solapur district. Now, limiting it to the area of Solapur district is not enough, because see, in Solapur district, you have primary students, secondary students, higher secondary students, degree students, PG students, and PhD students. So, and all these students are taught by the teachers. So, if there is some use of language learning strategies or not, who can tell? So I have to limit myself to a particular age group. So I have decided that I will go with the students of higher secondary school. So use of language learning strategies at higher secondary level in Solapur district. That will be the final title. I have removed all the ambiguities and spoken in clear terms, right? The problem needs to be defined unambiguously. There shouldn't be any ambiguity in the problem. This is how we define the problem unambiguously. Once the problem is defined unambiguously, the things become very easy. Okay, that is the second thing. The objectivity and validity of the background and facts concerning the problem must be verified. See, what we need in research is objectivity and validity. Background facts, we try to take certain background facts. Say, for instance, I'll speak about the same problem again. Okay. I have started speaking about use of language learning strategies. Okay, it's in my mind that I'll talk about the use of language learning strategies. Now, when I want to speak about, or when I want to research something about use of language learning strategies in a particular area, I first of all have to know what are the language learning strategies. Are these language learning strategies really useful for the students? I have to go to the theoretical research first. I have to find out if these language learning strategies are really useful for the student. Which of them are really useful? Because there is research carried out on language learning strategies earlier by some other people. So I have to take a review of all that literature and understand if it is objective, if it is valid, if it is meant for all the students, if it has the element of universality in it, if it is useful for the students in area where I am trying to carry out my research and everything like that. So the objectivity and validity of the background facts concerning the problem must be verified, and it is the duty of the researcher to do that. See, Professor W.A. Neiswanger, Professor W.A. Neiswanger has stated his statement. I'm reading out his statement in relation to research. Statement of the objective is of basic importance because it determines the data which are to be collected, the characteristics of the data which are relevant, relations which are to be explored, the choice of techniques to be used in these explorations, and the form of the final report. This is why objectives are important. They are of basic importance that we have to understand. Now, after understanding that there is objectivity and validity in the background facts of the problem to be verified, pertinent terms should be clearly defined along with the task of formulating the problem. What are we going to do? Now, we will come across several terms. Now, go to the same example, the use of language learning strategies. Okay, so I'll be defining language learning strategies in precise terms. I'll again define the language learning strategy theory in precise terms. What is the meaning of theory? What is the meaning of strategy theory? I'll define that in precise terms. I'll also define the number of language learning strategies discovered by the people, right, in precise terms. So everything should be clearly defined, and the task of formulating the problem should be clearly done. So this is the first thing that we are supposed to do. That is what we call formulating the research problem. Most important step in the process of research is extensive literature survey. Extensive literature survey. We call it literature review. In our language research programs, we call it literature review. A researcher is supposed to prepare a brief summary. When a problem is formulated, we have to prepare a brief summary. That is what you call a plan. A research scholar seeking PhD degree ought to write a synopsis of the topic and submit it to the research board for approval. That you know that. I mean, after completing this coursework, you people are supposed to submit a synopsis to the university. You're submitting this synopsis to the university means you're submitting this synopsis to the board of research, board of research or research board. That is called Research Recognition Committee in this university. Research Recognition Committee approves your synopsis for the further study. So you're supposed to formulate a problem and then prepare a brief summary of it. A brief summary of it to be submitted to the university. That everybody of you have to do that. Okay. The researcher must undertake extensive literature review and published and unpublished bibliographies. Remember, most extensive review has to be undertaken by the researcher in relation to a particular problem. What you will have to do? We'll have to find journals. Okay, all the journals, published bibliographies, unpublished bibliographies, academic journals, conference proceedings, government reports, books. Everything should be seen. Even if you are listening to the titles, you must be confused, right? Finding journals. How many possible journals are there on this topic? See this. How many published and unpublished if there are published biographies, that is good. If unpublished biographies, that is also good. You find biographies on Shodha Ganga, I suppose, right? It's easy to find biographies on Shodha Ganga, but see, I have seen that people download the biographies from Shodha Ganga just to use it at the end of the synopsis. It's not meant for that. You are supposed to download that biography and go through the material available. I mean, go through the list of books, go through the list of journals, try to read as many of them as possible. That is the actual intention behind telling you to attach biographies at the end, bibliographies at the end of it. So the researcher must undertake extensive literature review connected with the problem. For example, he must find journals, whether they are published and unpublished bibliographies. He must find academic journals. If there are conference proceedings, they are also useful. If there are government results, they are useful. And of course, books are useful. Everything should be tapped depending on the nature of the problem. What is the nature of your problem? And it should be remembered that one source leads to another. How? See, if I tell you to carry out research on something, if someone tells me to carry out research on, or we'll just continue with the problem that we were talking about, language learning strategies. Let us consider, we have spoken about language learning strategies. Now, I have tried to find out the language learning strategies, and I have found a few language learning strategies written by Rubin. Now, Rubin has invented 7 language learning strategies. Say, for instance, Rubin has invented 7 language learning strategies. Now, will I be testing use of only these 7 language learning strategies? Then I will see if there are some other language learning strategies. That will lead me to some other language learning strategies. And ultimately, it will lead me to Rebecca Oxford, who has listed 62 language learning strategies. So one source is leading you to the other source. Now, one thing that you have done is you have got a list of the language learning strategies because you have to test the use of language learning strategies in a particular area. That's fine. Now, but if there is some theory for the language learning strategies, you have to find out if these language learning strategies are useful. If they are useful, you need to have some kind of theoretical background. If things are useful, we read some theories that this theoretical background is there. And then you go for the language learning strategy theory. Now, when you write something about language learning strategy theory, you find various people talking about language learning strategy theory. So one source leads to another source, and that helps you to understand the problem in detail. So you should not be worried about the number of books, number of journals. It's very good to read as many books and journals as possible for you. Okay, the earlier studies, if any, which are similar to the study in hand, should be carefully studied. Again, about the same thing. Some people in China might have carried out a study in use of language learning strategies. Some people in Japan might have carried out similar kind of study. Some people in Gujarat might have carried out similar kind of study. It is good for me to have a record of all those studies. I should carefully study those studies and try to understand what were their findings and compare my research with those. So that is useful. Even in case of literary service, because most of us deal with either drama, poetry, novel, or anything like that, right? So even it is our duty to go for the conceptual understanding, but at the same time, we also have to see how many people have already taken this topic or a particular author for the study. And we have to understand what these people were saying about the same topic, and we have to compare our thinking with that of the other people's thinking. That is important. So it is very important to study the earlier research work done.
We'll talk about other steps in the next video. Thank you very much for watching.